Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. We are wrapping up the end of the second week of my pantry and freezer challenge, and I love it more every day. I have not been to the grocery store for groceries since the end of November. We are plugging along just fine. We just in the last few days ran out of tortillas. We also ran out of egg noodles. The only thing I have found that I've missed are salads. The caterpillars got to the salad greens that were growing on my porch in plastic urns, and I haven't even tried to start anymore yet. My husband is almost finished with a big hoop house that we've put in our backyard, not far from our regular large fenced-in garden, and that will allow us to grow more vegetables year-round, including salad greens and definitely other vegetables like brassicas that I often have a hard time growing in our fenced-in garden. I'm going to start by telling you what we've eaten this week, and then I'll share how I made tortillas and how I made pasta. I also want to let you know this month, here it is just the middle of December, and we have probably been away from home for supper almost half of the month. I would say at least 5 or 6 times we've had Christmas parties or a program to go to or something where food is served and we haven't even had to make supper at home. Now, while that is a tremendous blessing and it's super fun to be out, it's not really giving us the full effect of this pantry and freezer challenge. So I'm kind of planning on extending this challenge through the first 2 weeks of January. I would say the only difference would be I'm probably going to desperately want some lettuce by then. So I may go to the store to get some salad, but I would love to extend this challenge a few more weeks to get a better, clearer picture once the holidays have passed.
One morning, I made waffles. Instead of drenching them in pancake syrup right before sending them off to school, we made stacked waffles. I don't know if you've ever heard of stacked pancakes. Almanzo Wilder mentions them in Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and it's pancakes with butter and brown sugar in between the layers instead of syrup. I've never applied that to waffles before, but it was a huge hit and the kids really liked it, and the mess was much minimized since we didn't use syrup. I also made a really big double batch of banana muffins. I believe I had about 12 overripe bananas, and they were perfect for making banana muffins. My kids brought these as a snack for school. They had them after school for a snack, and they also had them for breakfast. Not all in one day, but over the course of the next 2 or 3 days. Oftentimes, if I don't have any bread made to make toast to go along with their eggs, I will make just simple breakfast burritos. And when I say simple, I mean scrambled eggs in a tortilla. That is it. I don't necessarily add cheese. There's no meat, but the kids still really like it. I didn't make bread nearly as often as I should have last week, and that is something that will need to change in the next 2 weeks going forward. You can see in this lunch, we still had some store-bought tortillas left, and so I just made meat and cheese roll-ups. It's just a couple pieces of turkey and ham and a few thin slices of cheddar, and I roll it up in a tortilla, and the kids enjoy that for lunch, but they definitely prefer sandwiches when I have bread made. I always have to make bread on Tuesdays so that my kids have bread to make grilled cheese sandwiches when we go out for date night on Tuesday nights. This is the lunch that was made Wednesday morning with the leftover bread from the night before. My kids really like peanut butter and honey, and there are no peanut butter restrictions at my kids' school. When I run out of bread and I run out of tortillas, my fallback is homemade Lunchables. I almost always have some boxes of Ritz crackers in the pantry, and so I will wrap up meat and cheese slices and crackers and put them in containers in my kids' lunch boxes, and they like them just fine. One morning, a friend texted me a picture of the blueberry scone that she had made in a Trim Healthy Mama cookbook. It was a single serving recipe, and I happened to have all the ingredients I needed to make it. It was really good. My daughter Annie has really enjoyed eating frozen berries in a bowl with her fingers as a snack after school. One of my goals for this week was to use a bag of wild rice. Some of these bags have a sell-by date of January, so this night I decided to make chicken and wild rice casserole, and I was intending to do some sauteed cabbage on the side, but I did not have time. I don't remember where I had to be that night, but I made supper for my family, and then I had to be somewhere else. My mother-in-law came to the rescue and helped my son Owen finish the casserole, and then he steamed some broccoli to have on the side. One of our favorite Christmas traditions is going to a church not far from our house where they do a hayride through the life of Christ, and then they serve tons of food that's free to the whole community. You roast hot dogs on the fire, they've got marshmallows, funnel cakes, kettle corn, hot chocolate. And it was a nice, cool night, which is never guaranteed here in the South. Sometimes we're in flip-flops, but it was cold. My husband stayed home with my youngest, who was really tired that night, but we had a great time. There were lots of Christmas lights, and we all came home full, and I didn't have to make supper. One night last week, I really wanted to make homemade chicken noodle soup. It was cold and it just sounded really good. However, the only noodles I had left in the pantry were spaghetti noodles, lasagna noodles, and elbow macaroni. None of those would taste very good in chicken noodle soup, so I decided to make some pasta for the first time in quite a few years. One of my sons even said, "Oh, Mom, you used to make pasta all the time." And I just laughed and said, "Yeah, that was back when we had 3 kids." I will include the pasta recipe that I used below in the description box, but I cannot tell you just how simple this recipe is. It is egg, flour, salt, and a little bit of water and olive oil. You just get it to the right feel. It's kind of hard to explain. And then you let it rest for a little while, you cut it up, and you run it through your machine. My son thought it would be really neat if I had a machine that had a motor on it, and I completely disagree. This is just the simplest process, and really I enjoy running the sheets of pasta over and over through the machine, hand cranking it. It takes minutes. It's so quick. It's a really fun thing to do. If you've never made pasta before, I seriously encourage you, or maybe I should say I challenge you, to try it. You do not even have to have a pasta machine. You can use a rolling pin, and to cut your noodles, well, first of all, you could either use the sheets just to make lasagna, or if you want to cut them into strips or short like egg noodles, you can just use a pizza cutter. It doesn't matter if they're perfect, and you can make them as thin or as wide as you want, but the flavor just does not compare to store-bought pasta. I bought this manual pasta machine at somewhere like TJ Maxx or Marshall's about 15 or 16 years ago. It's just a hand crank, as you can see, and that knob here closest to the camera, you adjust one little adjustment at a time, and your pasta gets thinner and thinner until you get it to the thickness that you want. I used all-purpose flour for this pasta, but you could use whole wheat flour, and there are quite a few different recipes you could try online. The countertop was lightly floured, and that is where the pasta laid to dry while I finished all the rest of the dough. Then I ran each sheet of dough through the fettuccine attachment. Then it was time to separate the noodles and let them hang dry for just a little while before adding them to the chicken soup. I got these pasta drying racks for about $3 a piece from the dollar spot at Target several years ago, and this is the first time that I used them. As we sat down together to eat this meal, we talked about how simple this recipe is, and yet how nourishing and delicious and just comforting it is to sit down to a bowl of homemade chicken noodle soup. You certainly don't need fancy or expensive ingredients to make a delicious meal from scratch. Have you ever read any of the children's books, like If You Give a Mouse a Cookie? That's what Monday morning felt like to me. I needed to go ahead and cook this breakfast sausage that had been in the fridge for a couple of weeks. As I was cooking the breakfast sausage, I thought about my favorite sausage ball recipe, which mixes cream cheese with cooked breakfast sausage. As I thought about that mixture, I thought I should make some scrambled eggs and do a huge batch of breakfast burritos to put in the fridge for the rest of the week. This was a great way to not only prep breakfast so that that's one less thing I have to do in the mornings before the kids go to school, but also a fantastic way to use up 2 dozen eggs. The only problem was we were completely out of tortillas. That meant it was time to make a big batch of tortillas. You can certainly make tortilla dough by hand, but if you have a mixer, why not use it? This recipe is so simple, it's only got a handful of ingredients, as I showed the recipe a little while ago. And then similarly to the pasta dough, you just let it rest for a little while and you divide it into even pieces. In this case, I followed a recipe that would have made 16 tortillas, but I doubled it, so that made 32. I needed to go ahead and cut my dough in half and then cut each of those into 16 somewhat even sections. I suppose you could get a kitchen scale out, weigh your dough, and divide it by 16 so you have 16 perfectly even tortillas. But I do not have time for that. It is not that important. Some of my tortillas are misshapen, and a few of them are smaller or larger than the others, and really it doesn't matter. I form each piece of dough into a ball and then press it down on the cookie sheet. They're then going to rest for 15 to 20 minutes before rolling them out or putting them in your tortilla press. Now, I have a Chef Pro 8-inch electric tortilla press. It is fantastic. I think I bought it for $25 on Amazon about 15 years ago, and I'm not sure if they even make them anymore. My tortilla press is hilarious. It screams and wails while it presses the dough. Just listen. Of course, that's just the sound of the steam escaping as it's pressed, but my kids always get a big kick out of it. I press all the rest of the dough out in the machine to make 32 tortillas. Now, I don't know if you saw, but I place each one in this Rubbermaid container while I'm making the rest. I keep a clean, damp rag on the kitchen counter to place on top of the tortillas as I'm continually stacking them. This helps none of them to get hard. They stay nice and soft while the rest are cooking. I combined the scrambled eggs and sausage and cream cheese mixture together in a large mixing bowl. I added salt and pepper and a little bit of garlic powder and began to fill the tortillas. I ended up having enough filling to make 28 breakfast burritos. I wrapped each burrito individually in plastic wrap and put them in 2-gallon freezer bags in the fridge, ready to use for the rest of the week. The funny thing is, by the next morning, I had already forgotten that I made them and was so excited to open the fridge and remember that breakfast was already made.
Thank you for joining me on this second week of my Pantry and Freezer Challenge. I'm excited to go into week 3. We are heading to Sam's Club tonight to pick up a new freezer. We have almost 200 pounds of venison that we are about to pick up from the meat processor from a very successful hunt over Thanksgiving weekend, and we've got to make room. If you've been doing this challenge with me, let me know in the comments how it's going. I look forward to sharing week 3 with you as well. Thanks for watching.